Hey guys, I'm excited to share with you what I think will be a total game changer in my garden this season, and that is how to set up an automated drip irrigation system. Now, before we get started, if you're equally excited about that, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. Also consider leaving a comment or two below. The company that I used for the vast majority of the products was the Drip Depot, and I'll be sure to link their company website in the description box below. My whole setup cost me about $121, which I felt was pretty reasonable. At the filming of this video, it's springtime, but we all know summer is coming here in Texas, and we don't want to let all of our efforts burn up to a crisp. So stay tuned, and I hope you guys find this video helpful. All right, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is sort of my water spigot setup. And so this is a little atypical than what you're probably used to. This is actually a tap off of my irrigation system. And so after the irrigation system was set up, I decided I needed a water source in this area because this is where I do all my gardening. And so that same crew came out and trenched a line out to this area, and so it's essentially like a water spigot, but it's not controlled with a knob. So what it's controlled with is sort of this sort of L-shaped device, and it's almost like a lock and key mechanism where you have to push it in, twist it, and then that allows the water to freely flow out. It's not doing so right now because I have a kind of a Y splitter here, and both of the valves are off. However, get out of the way so I don't shoot myself. If I turn it, you can see, I mean, that's a lot of water. So the water will come on. And so this here, like I said, is a splitter, and it creates obviously an option for you to use one spigot for multiple different water uses. And so I just needed a two, but this can also, I think this also comes in like a 4-head splitter. And so really handy if you're trying to use one spigot for multiple different water uses. And so how I use mine is on this one I have just a free hose that I use to water things, and on this one I am actually going to set up my automated irrigation system. This is your head assembly, and this is the first part of your drip irrigation system. So I'm going to go through each component here. This timer is what makes your irrigation system automated, and it attaches directly to either the spigot or the Y splitter. And so essentially it's the first component of your head assembly because it's rated to take the level of pressure that comes out of our municipal water systems, which is not true for the other components. This particular timer is single zone only. You see only one port at the bottom, though there are timers that have multiple ports at the bottom, each representing a different zone that you can set different times for. This timer is battery operated. Some timers are also Bluetooth and Wi-Fi enabled if you want a little bit more control from something like your smart device. And you just, like I said, essentially screw it on using the separate screwing mechanism, which is nice, so you don't have to spin the entire timer, which is very helpful. Okay, so the next component of your assembly head after the timer is this backflow preventer. And this is important because it prevents the flow of water further down in your line from coming back up and potentially contaminating your household water supply. Now, keep in mind, my system is actually off the irrigation line, and so I really already have a backflow preventer. However, it was really, the cost was pretty negligible, and I just went ahead and stuck with it because this was the recommended setup from the company I used. Okay, so next we're going to talk about a filter. That's the next component after the backflow preventer is a filter. I don't know. I mean, I'm on municipal water, so is this really necessary? I'm not entirely sure. Again, I went with the recommended head assembly from the Drip Depot, but One thing I did learn sort of the hard way is that when you pick the style of filter you're going to get, make sure that you have the appropriate ground clearance, because you see all this stuff at the bottom here. I mean, if my setup is very low to the ground, and so this is kind of cumbersome for me. They actually make a filter that's just in line, meaning all this bulkiness at the bottom is gone. But I've kind of overcome it by just sort of digging around it, and this bottom part just kind of sits in the dirt. All right, so the next component of your assembly head after the filter is going to be your pressure regulator. And this is important because your drip lines and emitters further down can't take the PSI that comes out of your main line here. So you need something that's going to decrease the pressure so that you don't blow out your system further on down the line. So this one decreases it down to 25 PSI. If you have drip tape, you may need even lower. Just make sure that whatever emitters you use in your beds, your garden beds, or in your landscape, that you know what PSI they're rated for. All right, and then the last part of the assembly head is actually this male to female adapter. And so this is the part that attaches to your 1/2-inch irrigation line. It is a permalock, and I will explain the difference between permalock and the barb. Essentially, the barb just usually has these barbs that prevent the hose from coming off, versus this, which actually, when you slide the hose over it, you tighten it down this way, and that's what keeps the hose in place. I like the permalocks better because if you need to repair anything, trying to pull that barb out is really a booger. And so, if possible, if you can choose between the permalock and the barbed couplings or fittings, stick with the permalock. I'm not actually going to attach this just yet. I'm actually going to attach it to the hose first and then attach this whole thing. Otherwise, it's going to be, I might really move this assembly head more than I need to, trying to get that hose on the end of this. So this is my 1/2-inch main line. This is the male part of the adapter. I'm just going to attach that by pushing it into the hose and squishing it till it's all the way at the top. Okay, then you just screw this down and that locks it in place. Okay, now I'm going to attach this to the rest of my assembly line here. All right, here is the head assembly, and then you can see my free hose there. So I'm going to walk you down here. You can bury this polyethylene tubing, so that's what I did so it wouldn't be a trip hazard. And I've got that all the way here. And so here you can see I ran that stretch of tubing all the way to this point, in which I had to split the tubing into several different directions. And you do that with several different types of fittings. This one is a cross fitting. So essentially you cut the tubing to the desired length. You then attach the permalock to the end of the tubing, and then you go from there. Along this stretch of tubing, I have 2 elbow fittings. You'll need, if you're going to do a raised garden bed setup, you'll need 2 of these elbow fittings per bed. Okay, and again, you just cut the 1/2-inch tubing to the desired length. And then you attach another length of tubing all the way to the desired length. At the end of your tubing, you're going to have at least 1 end cap per bed. Right, and so along this stretch of 1/2-inch tubing, this is what we call a header, and this is what you're going to attach your drip line or drip tape or whatever you decide to use. Here I attached 1/4-inch drip line, and this is emitting. They make this same 1/4-inch drip line in non-emitting, and so the difference is that the emitting has holes in it. I don't know if you can, where the water comes out, and the non-emitting doesn't. And you'd use the non-emitting if you want to attach separate emitters to it. So I just used the 1/4-inch emitting tubing for all of my beds here, and I believe they're spaced out every 12 to 9 inches, I'm not sure. But the way you attach this 1/4-inch tubing to your 1/2-inch is by using the 1/4-inch barb connector. Okay, and so you will have to place a hole in your 1/2-inch tubing using a punch tool. Then you place your barb connector into the tubing. Then you place your 1/4-inch tubing on the other end of that barb connector. Then you cut your 1/4-inch tubing to size. So I had it run all the way to down the length of my entire bed. And that at the end of this 1/4-inch tubing, you're going to need some way to stop all the water from coming out. Otherwise, it's not going to come out of the emitters. So you've got something here called a goof plug. And so that's what you stick on the end of this. Here, I've got a stake. You can use whatever stake you'd like. Honestly, these C ones, these like C-clamp stakes, they're a little tougher to work with. Like the tubing just wants to pop out of them all the time. So I think there's some better ones on the Drip Depot's website. I just forgot to order them, and so I had to use something from a local store. But because when this comes out, it's going to obviously, this 1/4-inch tubing, just like your 1/2-inch, is going to be all coiled up, and even if you set it out in the sun, it's going to have a bit of memory to it, so it's going to want to curl back up, and then that's not necessarily what you want. You want your drip lines to be relatively straight. So on the other end of my cross here, I've got another length of tubing cut to size. Again, 1, 2 elbow fittings, and then another length of tubing to cover the entire stretch of my header. This one's a 4x6 foot bed, so it's just under 4 feet stretch of tubing, and then you can see my end cap there. And just like in the smaller bed, I have got this 1/4-inch emitting tubing, which I attached the 1/4-inch barb, and I have 3 of those in this. I think it's about a little over 12 inches apart, these lines are. And then I had that run all the way down to the end, and again I've got a goof plug at the end here so the water doesn't just shoot out, right? And then I've got those staked down. Here I've used some of the more than metal stakes. Just out of curiosity, if you're like, why is this so empty here? I'm getting ready to put some corn in here. And so, and if you're wondering like, well, what's this giant metal thing? This is a cucumber trellis. I've got some cucumbers here, and hopefully they kind of vine up and there'll be a pretty dense mat here. And then the cucumbers hang out here on this side, but then they provide a little bit of shade for some of the salad greens, which really become tough to grow in the warmer months. And so I'm hoping that by giving them a little bit of shade from the foliage from the cucumbers, that maybe I won't have a whole bunch of bitter lettuce. But this is my first year doing this, and so we'll see how it goes. And then I'm going to back up here. So then again, so back at the cross, and then got another length of tubing cut to size, and then this time I have a T connector. And this T connector, you see I've got it staked down. This is where I've got another length of tubing. Again, 1, 2 elbow connectors, my header end cap here, and again those 1/4 inch emitting lines. And so as we go all the way down, the other end of my T connector is the last run of my tubing, my 1/2 inch tubing. I've got an end cap here. So you'll need at least 1 end cap per bed and 1 end cap for the end of your line. But then I have a little side, it's not really a bed, it's kind of a planter here where I've got strawberries and then a couple of cucumbers. But this 1/4 inch is attached exactly the same way, but this 1/4 inch is not emitting. So there's no water coming out of this one. But then I connected it, let me see if I can find my connection, yeah. I connected it to the 1/4 inch emitting tubing. So this tubing does, you can kind of see the holes here, is the one that actually waters the plants. So, and I just kind of ran that through there. And so that is my irrigation setup. You kind of see it from this direction here. So one of the things I recommend to help give your raised garden bed irrigation setup just a neater look are these C-clamps. And that just helps keep those headers nice and flush with the edge of the garden bed. And so the C part just wraps around the 1/2 inch tubing, and it comes with a small nail that you essentially hammer into the structure of your garden bed. All right, guys, I hope you found that video helpful. I will tell you though, the second biggest challenge that many of us will face come summertime is managing the afternoon sun. And I have a great video on one way I overcame that challenge, and I wanted to share it with you. So do consider watching that. Also, stay tuned to this channel because I plan on sharing how I put together and planned my garden pad, also rain barrels and what made me pick a rain harvesting tank. Also just some planting or planter ideas that I've got coming up in the next days to a few weeks. So stay tuned and y'all take care.